Here's an idea. Over the Garden Wall is about having faith in the face of the impossible. In the event you've been wandering the woods for the last month, Over the Garden Wall is a 10-episode Cartoon Network miniseries created by Adventure Time's creative director Patrick McHale. In an Adventure Time meets Grimm Fairy Tales meets Miyazaki meets Mark Twain meets style, Over the Garden Wall follows brothers Wirt and Greg, Beatrice, a talking bluebird, and their frog, variously named Kitty, George Washington, Dr. Mr. President, Benjamin Franklin, and so on, around a rural, mysterious, Americana-infused landscape called the Unknown, as the boys try to find their way home.
Where are we?
In the woods?
Along with having been met by nearly universal critical praise, Over the Garden Wall is also the most requested Idea Channel episode topic in recent history by a long shot. Thematically, OTGW has a lot in common with our episode about the cable news. It's an exploration of how fear can pull at one's puppet strings. Endicott is afraid of a ghost, Miss Langtree of a gorilla, and that Jimmy is gone for good. Lorna is afraid of Auntie Whispers, and Auntie Whispers of Lorna leaving. The woodsman is afraid of losing his daughter, and so on, and so on, and so on. The main antagonist, the Beast, a baritone-voiced, horned black figure with glowing eyes, provides an undiluted personification of the fear that is pervasive in the unknown. And as a matter of fact, when the woodsman warns Wirt and Greg to beware the unknown, it's not super clear if he means the place, the beast, or the general concept of that which is not known. As it turns out, their respective reflexes in the face of the unknown, in each of its forms, ends up making Wirt and Greg heroes. But it also sets up a tension between them. Greg, the younger teapot-topped brother, is a big ol' ball of hopeful. He's got faith that things will work out and occasionally doesn't even appear to know that he should be afraid. Pointy-headed Wirt, on the other hand, is a bit more resigned to stuff being hopeless or unlikely. That is, until, spoiler alert, so take out your headphones or turn down your volume until I put my spoiler hand down. That is, until he is shown how his lack of faith can poison those he cares about. It's all clear now. TV Tropes casts Wirt and Greg as the cynic and optimist archetypes respectively. For me, the brothers typify another duo as well, Soren Kierkegaard's Knights of Resignation and of Faith. Kierkegaard wrote about these knights in Fear and Trembling, a dialectical lyric about what it means to have and act upon faith, inspired by the biblical story of Abraham, who is commanded by God to kill his son Isaac. Abraham has faith in God, so he does as he's told, but just before he's about to kill Isaac, he's allowed to sacrifice a ram instead. He has proven his faith. He would kill his own son at the word of God. Kierkegaard had a hard time imagining himself in Abraham's sandals. Would Kierkegaard believe that God would pardon him, stay his hand, or bring his son back after the sacrifice? I don't know. Having that kind of faith is not easy. Abraham and other knights of faith, Kierkegaard wrote, have no such doubts. They act on, quote, the strength of the absurd. Though convinced of something's, quote, humanly speaking, impossibility, they maintain it will or must happen in some other not humanly way. That impossible seeming something doesn't have to be holy intervention either. Kierkegaard writes about a young lover pining after a princess, and if that young lover were a knight of faith, he might realize the absurdity of their union, but believes it possible somehow, perhaps through the will of some divine force, nonetheless. And divine force, from my perspective, not so much from Kierkegaard's, we could be talking about all kinds of inscrutable stuff. God, luck, chance, destiny, the free market, who knows. A knight of infinite resignation, on the other hand, resigns himself to loneliness. No princess, no hope, no one to drive with him to IKEA on Sundays. Not gonna happen. He doesn't abandon the thought of their love, though. Resignation is not surrender. He is not, Kierkegaard writes, afraid to let his love steal in upon his most secret and hidden thoughts, to let it twine itself in countless coils around every ligament of his consciousness. By comparison, the Knight of Faith lives a life less binding. Quote, carefree, devil may care, good for nothing, he hasn't a care in the world. He resigned everything infinitely and then took everything back on the strength of the absurd. So maybe that's Greg, along for the ride, worry-free, sure that everything is gonna work out, carrying candy in his pants.
Candy camouflage!
And Wirt is our Knight of Resignation, what with his, spoiler hand, general reluctance, mopey poetry, and Sarah feels. I wonder if amongst all of its ideas about fear and the unknown, Over the Garden Wall is also at least a little illustrating something of the tendency to be full of faith as children and resignation as adolescents.
I don't want to have anything to do with you or that frog.
Okay, I'll try to think of a name myself.
If it's not true, then at the very least it's a trope that as the intricacies of the world come into focus, we find it harder and harder to have faith that they will work in our favor. Kierkegaard says the knight of faith must resign first, give up their view of the world, and then take it back under new conditions, new understanding. What view do faith-having children, and by extension Candy Pants Teapot Dome here, have to give up? I'm not sure, maybe none? At this age, what does Greg, as our exemplar, even have to give up? Faith begins precisely where thinking leaves off, Kierkegaard wrote, but maybe it's not a giving up so much as it's the careful selection of the set of things deemed appropriate to think with. Children, and Greg, have, by their very nature, only a very particular set of knowledge at their disposal. Does this make them somehow more capable or powerful, especially in the face of the unknown? While watching Over the Garden Wall, for some reason I couldn't shake this feeling that Greg has so much in common with Ness, the main character from the video game Earthbound, which you might also know as Mother 2. Not gonna lie, their similar shape probably has something to do with it. Ness doesn't have a damp blanket turned hero co-conspirator, but both he and Greg are these willing, faithful characters of action. In a landscape littered with fearful adults, they don't ever question their capability, or really even that capability has something to do with it. They just go for it and work towards ousting this abstract, terrifying evil, hoping to return their lives to normal and seemingly acting on some faith that they know they can, that it will. In Earthbound, it's a bit more explicit given how you have to defeat the final boss, Gygus, by praying. By praying a few more times than feels right, if I remember correctly. It's been a little while since I played Earthbound, but it means that both the character, Paula, and the player, the person holding the controller, need to have a little faith. In Over the Garden Wall, it's a little more up in the air for reasons that are pretty clear if you've seen the ending. But could we say that they wouldn't have made it through if it weren't for Greg's faith? Maybe we could. If it's not a fact, at the very least, maybe it's a rock fact.
It's a rock fact.
What do you guys think? Does Over the Garden Wall say anything interesting about faith when trying to navigate the unknown? Let us know in the comments, and to keep Idea Channel's lantern lit, please subscribe. I've got a blank space, baby, for you to write a comment. Let's see what you guys had to say about Taylor Swift. Kayla Haffley writes a really interesting comment about the distinction between masculine and female narratives and talks about how you could view Taylor Swift as someone who is putting together a true or authentic, with all of the scare quotes required for authentic, female narrative, but that she still appears to be somewhat constructed. And I think that this is maybe always the, like dialectic of being some kind of mega pop star that is advertising some level of personableness or authenticity that, because of the way people interact with you, because of the fact that you have a team of people managing you, you will always seem somewhat constructed. And yeah, navigating that process as we watch Taylor Swift do all the time is, I think, really interesting. But yeah, Kayla, thank you for writing this comment. This was great. shessomickey writes a great comment about how, regardless of Taylor Swift's possible reinforcing of traditional images of women, she is no less powerful a feminist, and that one of the sort of central tenets of modern feminism is that however someone chooses to perform their gender, that makes them no less of a feminist. The other thing shessomickey brings up that we didn't talk about is Taylor's crossover from a country artist to a pop artist, and this makes me wonder whether or not there is maybe a connection between the agency Taylor feels over her image and songwriting that allows her to make that transition and her involvement in conversations about gender and pop music or popular culture, which she has been doing a lot more recently. And yeah, I wonder if there's something there. I'm just sort of putting this together as I'm saying it, but this is what this made me think of, so this is, yeah, interesting. Mara K writes a comment about how though you can view Taylor Swift as someone who is writing her own story and in control of her own image, there are things about that story and image that you could view as less than positive. And yeah, this is a criticism of Taylor Swift, especially her older stuff, that I can absolutely see and understand. I had read somewhere, so I don't know if this is true at all, that she had actually stopped performing certain songs that could be read as sending the wrong message to young women. I don't say that as a defense of any kind, just to say that, I think, yeah, that's a sort of admission that there are parts of this story that are, iffy at best. And finally, I want to spend a couple minutes responding not to a particular specific comment, but a type of comment that was left on last week's video and is left sometimes on other videos. There were a lot of people who said that they just blanketly assume every pop star has their music written for them and that they don't make a consideration for gender. Male, female, whatever. They just assume if you're a pop star, you don't write your music. And if that is the case for you, that's awesome. I'm glad. You shouldn't. You should not make that gender distinction. I mean, maybe you should believe that some people write their own music, but that's another thing entirely. But there were a significant number of comments, I think, that went one step further and said that they believe there is no group of people who make that gender distinction, that I literally invented the idea that there is a group of people who assume female pop stars don't write their own music just for the episode. And I want to talk about that for a couple reasons. First and foremost, Taylor Swift, who we quoted in the episode, says that this distinction does exist, that she has experienced it firsthand, and she is a music professional who works in the industry and has experience with this situation. And I see some of you reaching for the authority fallacy video that we made, and I would like to remind you that Taylor Swift is an authority not only on her own experiences, but also the music industry, an actual authority. So there is no fallacy here. You could argue that she has invented this thing for some bizarre PR reason, but I think that that is exceptionally cynical. And second, there's a thing that I've started to notice now, having done Idea Channel for a little while, which is that these types of comments where we get accused of making things up, relying on hearsay, or inventing stuff, really only happen in very specific situations. They show up in videos where I quote a female theorist, talk about social issues, representation, or women. These are the situations where we get accused of just making stuff up. And what I'm not saying is that on every other Idea Channel video where we don't talk about those things, people are 100% on board or in agreement. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that on those other videos, like about Too Many Cooks, if someone disagrees, the response is usually something like, I don't know how I feel about this, or nah, that's a little bit of a long walk, or, you seem to misunderstand this thing. We don't get accused of making things up. It's not like a rampant problem. We're not being accused of making things up every other comment, but it is a thing that I have noticed, and I think it's important to point out, and also, to be perfectly honest, it kind of upsets me a little bit, so I just wanted to get it off my chest. The end.